Hi, Smart News. Hope you're off to a great Monday so far. I know it was a big weekend, a heavy weekend of news. So just want to give you a couple items to have on your radar as you face a new week. These are big events that could have potentially big headlines. So want to make sure you're ready for all of them. We're going to start off with what's happening on Capitol Hill today. We're going to be watching some very key testimony from our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Secretary Blinken will be appearing in front of the House and then the Senate tomorrow. And the topic of conversation is going to be the U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan. So this is a big topic. Remember, lawmakers are representing the people who elected them. So Republicans and Democrats will be able to ask Secretary Blinken in these key committees, these high-profile committees that really are focused on foreign relations or foreign affairs, will be really hyper-focused on what has transpired over the last several weeks in Afghanistan. Some couple things I want to point out to you there, including some news coming from Afghanistan, is over the weekend on the commemoration of 9/11, Al-Qaeda released a brand new video. This is Ayman al-Zawahiri. He's thought to be the leader of Al-Qaeda, and there's been all sorts of questions about whether or not he's still alive. Now, this video was released on 9/11, but we don't know exactly when it was recorded. So this isn't necessarily proof that he's still living and still the head of Al-Qaeda, but certainly still an important figure. And this video was released specifically, strategically, on the anniversary of the terrorist attacks that Al-Qaeda planned and carried out. So important to note here, big news out of Afghanistan. Remember as well that although lawmakers are going to be focused specifically on Afghanistan, they can really ask questions on any number of items. And we did see some news this weekend from North Korea. North Korea test firing a new missile. This is important for several different reasons. First off, the State Department designates North Korea along with Syria, Iran, and Cuba as state sponsors of terrorism. North Korea is also a nuclear nation. When they test fire missiles like this, it raises all sorts of questions about their military capabilities. And this particular test of a missile took place ahead of a major meeting of leaders in Asia. So the timing of it is important. There's always a question when North Korea does this. What's their end goal? What's their end game? Why are they doing it now? So we'll be watching this news to see what more we learn from the State Department or the Defense Department, but we'll also be watching Secretary Blinken and whether or not he receives any questions on this as well. I also don't want to forget this is happening today. The Navy just announced that on this day, the same day that Secretary Blinken is going to be testifying about Afghanistan, one of the service members who was killed during that evacuation, Max Soviak, will be buried today. So all of these events taking place, all of them important, and we'll keep watching to see what headlines we see out of Washington, D.C. and otherwise. In the meantime, I am going to take you back to a completely different story that is focused on a state of California. And although I could maybe show you different pictures of politicians, I thought I would just show you beautiful pictures of California. Why not? We're watching the recall election for the governor there, Governor Gavin Newsom. And so this is it's a very interesting story for several different reasons. First of all, it's interesting politically just when you look at the state of California, but remember, California has one of the largest economies in the entire world. So what happens there affects us around the nation and, quite frankly, around the world. Also, we're watching the political undercurrents here. How motivated are voters like Democrats and Republicans? What does this really tell us about pandemic politics, which is really the reason that initially this recall started, but it's turned into being a recall on any number of issues. So what voters get to do is they get to check the box whether or not they want to recall the governor, and then they can check who they would like to replace him. And that could be any number of more than 40 people. So we'll see what actually transpires here in the state of California. By the way, we are watching the president who will be visiting the state of California to focus on wildfires today. The actual election day for the recall is Tuesday, tomorrow. Will we get results on Tuesday? Doesn't look like it, but that's the thing about recall elections. You never know what's going to happen. And by the way, a recall election in recent history led to an election of a Republican governor. The most recent Republican governor in the otherwise blue state, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, was voted into office because of a recall election. So we'll be watching what happens in California and if we can read the tea leaves, as they say. Does it tell us anything about what voters are thinking, how they're feeling at this point, whether it's on Democrat or Republican platforms or about specific candidates? Just a fun story. When I was a young journalist in San Francisco, I was working basically for free as a freelancer, a print reporter for a district newspaper. And the supervisor or the politician for that district in San Francisco was Gavin Newsom. So he was one of my first interviews as a young journalist. He went on to become mayor of San Francisco, obviously went on to become governor. And over the years, it's been thought that he could be a potential presidential candidate. So, that's an interesting story just to watch in and of itself to see about this one individual's political career, but otherwise, what does it look like? What's the political landscape of this very important state? All right, let me tell you about what's happening on Wednesday. This is interesting. Here you have a group of individuals that are extraordinary in their own way. They're extraordinary in their own way, but they actually don't have something key. They are not astronauts, yet they are going to be launched into orbit on Wednesday. SpaceX is doing this for a first of its kind launch that will launch these four into orbit. No one's going to be actually piloting the vessel, the spacecraft. You know, SpaceX has launched any number of spacecraft rockets into space to make deliveries of astronauts and otherwise to the International Space Station. This is something different, and people are paying close attention to this, obviously because it's interesting, but also to see what it tells us about the future of space tourism. So we'll see if that happens on Wednesday. It's always weather dependent. Finally, I just want to tell you on Friday, something important to know, advisory panel for the FDA meeting. It's going to be discussing booster shots for the COVID-19 vaccine. Once the advisory panel makes known its thoughts, if it is something that they believe should happen, the FDA could quickly move to say booster shots are available for a certain group of people, for example. So we'll watch that. I know there's a lot of questions as well about COVID-19 vaccines for kids. Just know that the timeline is still looking that the clinical trials will sort of wind up in the next several weeks. And this is for children 5 to 12, 5 to 16, this younger age group. It looks like they're going to be wrapping up in the next several weeks. Maybe by Halloween, the FDA could be considering emergency use authorization for that. I know it's a big topic. No, we'll be watching it clearly, but it's the booster shots that this advisory panel is going to be looking at first. So want to make sure you know that. Finally, on this day, we're celebrating an important birthday, and maybe gives you an excuse to eat a little bit of chocolate. This is Milton Hershey. You know the name Hershey. You should just know this. Milton Hershey loved candy. Unfortunately, many of his business ventures failed and failed and failed until he realized that if you use fresh milk and caramel, you make a pretty good chocolate. And he used that money from the caramel business to launch what we now know as Hershey chocolates. He's a fascinating guy. Unfortunately, his wife and him, they weren't able to have children. And so as part of his lasting legacy, he decided to donate his fortune to a school for orphan boys. And that school is still in operation today. It's the Milton Hershey School. It still serves those that are from lower income families. So still in operation. It's just an amazing story, very interesting historic story about perseverance, but also about altruism. And you know, if you need, it is Monday. So if you just wanted to celebrate with a little Hershey kiss or something like, I'm not going to judge. I think it might be appropriate. Might be appropriate, but I'm going to look to do some interview. I think that would be a really interesting interview to dig in a little bit more about the adventure of Hershey's chocolate, because it's something that we all know. And obviously this gentleman had a very interesting personal history as well. And we love that. It gives us all perspective, doesn't it? All right, that's your week. That's the week ahead. We'll keep you posted as we get headlines, sift through them, make sure you know what's going on and why it matters, and all these stories and more on smarternews.com. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you soon.